Hello, my little hellhounds. Welcome to Home of Scares. If you like the chills running down your spine and to be scared, fueled with anxiety, then join us twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And don't forget to increase your anxiety levels. Just make sure you subscribe. Sleep tight, my hellhounds. Tonight we have subscriber stories. Our stories tonight are submitted by you 130794. The wolf that spared my life. This story happened to me when I was 8 years old. I was spending my winter vacation with my grandparents at their house in the mountain side of my country. My grandparents don't live there anymore, as my grandfather died in 2012 and my grandmother moved closer to us in our city. She is 85 now. When I was 8, my mum moved to Atlanta, USA for a while, leaving me and my father home. My father had 2 jobs and no time to raise me, so I would often stay at one of my grandparents' houses, either her parents or his parents. The house at the mountainside was my grandparents' on my dad's side. We still own it. The house is officially 135 years old now, and is one, if not the oldest and best preserved houses in that area. It caught both world wars and the Balkanic War. I still find bullets in under the ground. Each house was placed linear in the sense that you had a road, and on each side of the road there would be houses separated from each other by other smaller streets that would head towards a river and a train bridge. I would often go across the bridge and the river as a child, but that is a story for another time. One night at 7 or 8 p.m, I recall sneaking out of our garden and into the small street, and on my way to this river and train bridge. Our house was on a hill and the river was downhill. Since it was winter, it was pretty dark outside, but I loved exploring the wooded area which the bridge was near, and having to reach it, I would go down the hill and face a fence with a gate that would indicate the houses have ended and the forest is near. I opened the gate. It was always open because someone broke the lock a long time ago and no one bothered to fix it, and step inside. I had my grandparents' dog with me. His name was Picky, a very colourful collie by my side. Picky was the kind of dog that would follow me anywhere. If I left the garden, even if I locked him in, he would dig under the fence and come after me. He would always defend me. As we enter the gate, I hear Picky growling and staring into the woods at seemingly nothing. I see his back fur raising as cats do when they want to attack, and his fangs exposed. I look in the direction his eyes are locked and see a huge wolf emerge from behind the trees and towards me with gracious but menacing steps. I hear the snow crack under Picky's paws as he is slowly backing down and slightly leaving his ears behind. At first, I don't understand why, but when I look at the wolf that has now stopped a few feet away from me, locking eyes with me, I notice a wolf cub come out from behind the wolf's legs. I am now scared. I watched enough National Geographic to know that mother wolves are savages when they have cubs, especially if they feel threatened by other animals or people. And here I am, a human child with a growling collie at her and her cub. The snow was big and I was winter dressed. I knew I couldn't run faster than a wolf. If she lunged at me, I would be done for. I started crying due to mixed reasons. First was, of course, because I was scared, but I would also look at the beautiful wolf cub clinging at his mother's legs and think about my own mother and feel so vulnerable and motherless in the moment. Picky is now behind me, moving slowly away from me, sobbing as if trying to convince me to run with him, but I can't. I locked my eyes with that wolf the entire time. She was there because I felt that the moment I turn my back away or break the eye contact, she will jump at me to protect her baby. I felt icy tears trickle down my cheeks as I started talking to that deadly yet beautiful creature. This may seem nuts to some, but I was 8 and missed my mother and was afraid, said to the wolf on a calm, childlike voice, but obviously affected by crying. You have a beautiful cub. I am a cub too. Please don't hurt me. I kept saying things like that for what felt like an eternity. Mother wolf never breaking eye contact, staring me right into my soul with her yellow eyes. This encounter lasted maybe 5 to 10 minutes tops, but it felt much longer. She looked at her cub, who is now agitated, looks at me one more time and turns around slowly, vanishing into the woods with her baby. My feet unlock. Adrenaline is slowly leaving my body, and I break into tears, wiping my eyes and thanking God I was not hurt. I head back home, and as soon as I hold the gate to exit, I hear the most beautiful sound ever, for the first time in reality and not just on National Geographic. The wolf howl. It gave me goosebumps, and it does ever since whenever I hear a wolf howl. Although this experience was scary and can count as a possible near-death experience, it did change my thoughts on wolves. I now respect and worship them. I am in love with their howls, and I simply admire them to my core. That wolf could have easily bitten me or badly damaged me. Maybe she didn't because of her cub or my dog, or maybe somehow she understood me. I don't know. I've gotten myself a tattoo of that wolf's expression as a reminder of her icy cold stare, and how a deadly yet beautiful creature spared my life when I was only a child wandering the woods brainlessly. Ever since, the wolf has become my spirit animal. The Cat Whisperer. This is a story about a neighbour I had growing up. My name or town is not relevant for the story. I remember I was 6 years old when I first met her, but first, an important detail that will make sense later in the story. I had a Norwegian forest cat growing up, which was taught to walk on a leash like a dog. Her name was Fifi. I would occasionally take Fifi outside in the garden to sniff around and play with insects or look at birds. Fifi was a well-behaved and composed cat. One time I got approached by a relatively old lady. She looked around 50 or 60 years old, holding a bag and seemingly talking to herself. She notices me, greets me with a hello and a big smile, and approaches me. "Oh my, what a beautiful cat you have," she says, then asks me her age, her name, her weight, her manners. You know, normal questions someone asks when seeing a pet. I was very happy of Fifi, so I would always brag about how clean she is and so on. The old woman, who I shall call Sandra, had a huge love for cats. Later on, I would notice that she would come to the garden every day, at least twice a day, with cat food. Up to the day I met her, I never saw stray cats around my block, but whenever Sandra would come and call for them, about 8 to 10 cats would appear from nowhere, meow loudly, and run towards her, greeting her. To me, that was the meaning of happiness at the age of 6. I loved cats and being around so many and allowed to pet them and feed them. That was all I wanted to do. But for some reason, Sandra would only allow me to be around her when she would call the cats. Now, those cats weren't indoor cats. No one owned them. But they took a liking to Sandra, and Sandra alone. They would all hiss at me or anyone else, would run away or even scratch you if cornered. Sandra was a pretty odd lady. She didn't have children of her own. She wasn't married, didn't have relatives taking care of her, and I have never seen other people her age spend time in her company. All my childhood, she was Sandra, the crazy cat lady. I always thought people were just being rude for no reason. My parents had to give my cat Fifi to another family because my mother developed an allergy to cat fur. It was heartbreaking for me because Fifi was my first and only pet. They did it all in secrecy. I didn't even know to whom they gave her, and only knew that it was some family in the neighbourhood. I made amends with the idea and slowly forgotten about Fifi until one day when I was 13 and coming home from school. My grandmother died the day before, and my mum was sending packages to all of our neighbours. It's a cultural tradition when someone dies to do so. One of the deliveries I had to make was at Sandra's house, a place I've never been to before. I knock at the door and could hear meows from inside the house, indicating that she owned cats too, not just feeding strays. She answers with a startled look on her face and asks me what it is. I tell her my mum sent me with a package and why. She doesn't express her condolences as most people would normally do, but instead invites me inside to a glass of lemonade. She specifically asked me not to touch or talk to any of her cats, as they talk back and aren't polite. As soon as I enter the house, I could smell the stench coming from probably her 20 or so cats that she had. The house was dirty, the light was dim, there was cat kibble all over the place, fur all over the furniture, was all damaged by her cats. It would have been impolite of me to mention it, so I haven't. Sandra comes in the living room with 2 glasses of lemonade, handing me one and inviting me to sit down. I did that with a hustle because I had to move at least 3 cats, a gesture she did not take kindly on. She went on talking about how people need to learn how to treat cats, not animals in general, just cats, with the respect they deserve. Talked about how all her cats are the living embodiment of humanity, something I could not understand at the time. She asked how Fifi was, to which I replied with the truth. Fifi was not with us anymore. The moment I finished saying that, Sandra drops her lemonade glass and looks at me with a furious expression. She then says, "How could you be so naive and stupid to let them do that? Wasn't she a living creature of God? Don't you think she had a spirit? Where exactly did you throw her?" Her reaction scared me. I knew she was a cat fanatic, but to talk to a small kid like that, especially when mourning because of a cat, seemed too much. Sandra wouldn't have it. She stood up, stepping barefooted in the shattered pieces of glass, grabbed my wrist and pulled me out of her house, saying, "Only when you find their purity, their pain, their regrets, should you ever cross paths with me again." I haven't seen Sandra ever since, but I did get to hear her story from her neighbour, which would constantly complain about the smell on their floor. She told me that Sandra suffered from schizophrenia and that she did have a daughter when she was younger, but because of her condition and depression that began after her birth, gave her to a foster home without the husband knowing at the time. This made links unrepairable between them, and he left Sandra. That was when she started collecting cats. She would worship them because she genuinely believed 2 things. Firstly, she believed that cats were either the reincarnation of her still living daughter and husband. Secondly, she thought that cats in general are the embodiment of human souls. Her first 2 cats were named after her daughter and husband, with whom she never kept in touch. Sandra would sleep with her felines, bathe with them, and other less Christian things. All of her inside cats were kittens of the first 2. She transformed her home into a cat sanctuary because she thought they were people trapped in feline bodies. Because they have sinned in life, and needed to repent. She considered herself a cat whisperer because only she could hear them talk as humans do, demanding her things from taking in more cats to pushing away real people, or even harm those who wouldn't respect cats. She has been institutionalized, but released every time. Thinking of her, I can still vividly remember her anger and resentment towards me and my family about my cat's adoption, how she bled from her feet that day and still kept her composure, genuinely believing that cats were vessels of the human soul. She still lives there, locked in her sanctuary, with the only living creatures that she deemed worthy of respect and love. The Baby Snatcher. This story happened a while back when I used to work as a front desk receptionist for a private hospital. That implied people coming straight to me when they entered the building. I will make this one short because the event itself happened very fast, a matter of minutes, but it was scary to both me and the mother involved. I remember one day a mother came to the hospital with her baby in the stroller. I love babies, so while her mother would sign up the papers she needed for her doctor's appointment, I would make faces and sounds for the baby to behave and laugh. This made the mother smile at me. After about 3 to 5 minutes, the mother asks me if it would be possible for me to keep an eye on her baby, as she needed to go to the bathroom real quick. I agreed, pulling the stroller inside my booth near the door of the booth so Mama can take it out easily. I did this for 2 reasons. 1, to have the baby safe. 2, so I could also do my work, as my boss wouldn't take kindly on us slacking off work, no matter the reasons. This baby was beautiful. It was a gorgeous baby boy, blue eyes, red hair and freckles, the kind of baby you see on commercials. As soon as Mama goes to the bathroom and I pull the baby inside my booth, another woman comes in with no appointment. She mumbles about wanting to make one, asks a lot of questions about the hospital, the services, anything you could easily find on the internet. I play professional and give her all the information she needed. She sees some merchandise in my booth with the hospital logo, flyers, pens, maps, caps, etc. And she asks me if she could have any. I say sure and turn my back at her to grab the stuff. When I turn back at her to give her the merchandise, I see that she came around my booth at the doorway, snatched the baby and was now walking in front of my booth, not fast, trying to maybe not look suspicious. I see that immediately, scream for the guard as I climb on my booth and lunge at her, grabbing her to immobilize. The security guard was not far away, but in his defense, he was on the other side of the building when the baby's mother came in, so he didn't know who she looked like. He grabs the baby, hands him to me, picks up the woman who is now screaming out of her lungs, "He's my baby, she stole my baby," towards me, also spitting at the security guard. Lucky enough, the baby mama comes out of the bathroom, only to see her baby outside his stroller, crying in my arms, and a crazy woman shouting how the baby is hers. The mother runs to me, takes her baby back with tears in her eyes, asking what happened and thanking both me and the guard for saving her baby. The police were called. They came and took the woman in, but to be quite honest, I think they took her to a mental hospital, because after being caught, the woman would make no sense, was very aggressive, and would try to hurt anyone who touched her. I am happy the security guard was there. If it weren't for him, I couldn't have been able to take back the baby from this baby snatcher. To all the mamas out there, please never leave your babies unsupervised, even if the worker is willing to help and loves babies. You never know what happens. And to the lady snatching babies and claiming them to be hers, I hope we never meet again. How I ended up feeling like the angel of death. I am going to incorporate 3 stories into one. All the 3 stories are real stories. Please bear with me. It will be a long post, so if you don't want to read it, just pass by. 2 years ago, in 2017, I remember it was either the 26th or the 27th of December, right after Christmas. I was taking the subway to go home from my boyfriend's house to my parents' house. I live in Bucharest, Romania. The subway was full, but I did manage to find a free chair, so I sit down. The stops go by one, relatively fast, reaching the stop I needed. I was sitting between 2 people, a man and a woman, not related to each other. The woman was a petite blonde girl with blue eyes and glasses, reading something in the phone, and sitting on my right, she looked as if she was somewhere between 20 and 30 years old. On my left, there was a big, I could say overweight man. I couldn't tell how old he was. To me, he seemed as if he was above 60 years old, but overweight people tend to leave that impression. As I sit there listening to music, I feel a slight pressure on my left shoulder, growing and growing. I do not move my head, but check with my peripheral vision to see the man placing his head slowly on my shoulder. I do not make a fuss about it, as I don't really mind if someone falls on you for being tired. I would wake them up if I needed to stand, but all in all, it really does not bother me that much. Many of my friends find this really weird of me, but I think it's just being understanding of someone's level of exhaustion. A few minutes pass by. I feel the man's head getting harder and harder to sustain on my shoulders, taking me and my own body weight to hold him. While having headphones in my ears, I look at the people in front of me, not hearing what they say, but watching their terrified expressions on their faces, some of them covering their mouths, some of them making the cross sign, some of them looking panicked or sobbing, and all of them looking at me. I take my headphones off, I look at them, I ask what's wrong, and at the same time I glance at the man sleeping on my shoulder, only to see a white and purple face staring into my soul, with lifeless eyes and mouth wide open. My heart drops into my stomach as I realized the man never fell asleep on my shoulder. He fell dead instantly on me with his entire body weight. I feel sick instantly and I freak out internally. I put my hand on his neck to feel an extremely faint pulse, but still rushing through his body. I look around and scream, "He's not dead. Someone help me turn him on his back fast." As soon as I say that, two men run to me and pull him off his chair and place him on the subway floor. Everyone moving around, forming a circle around me and him. Thank God I know CPR, I thought to myself, hoping with all my heart to keep the heartbeat still beating until the paramedics arrive. People were all calling the ambulance. The subway had already stopped for good at that point, realizing what was going on. No one with more body strength than me offered to help me with the CPR procedure. I'm not small either, I'm fairly built, but the entire procedure is painful, tiring, and if you stop for a second, you can lose the pulse. So I stand on top of him, place both my palms on his chest, and begin to count in my mind and push on his chest, alternating with breathing air into his lungs. I have done that for 25 minutes, because that's how long it took the ambulance to arrive there. When they came there, the man still had a pulse. They asked us what happened, what did we do, how did he fall, did he hit himself, stuff like that, and proceeded to give him the care he needed. After the paramedics arrived, I decided to leave as the experts were there, so I did that. The man already looked purple and blue by then. I hoped for the best and prayed to God for him, but God did not listen to my prayers. Later that day, I found out from the news that the man had died. not too late from the moment the paramedics arrived. It made me feel so bad, knowing I tried my best to keep him alive, but also wondering why did he drop like that as soon as I sat next to him. Story 2, Second Soul. This one is pretty famous in Romania and caused hysteria in my country. It is about the metro murderess. This story is as true as it can be. There are articles about it, and yes, it happened just as I will tell you. This happened again at the subway. For some reason, all the fucked up stuff like this happens in the subway. I wait for my train, not many people around, just a few coming and going as the subways arrive and leave. I was at the very end of the line near the stairs, looking for the subway to come, waiting patiently. Right ahead, maybe like 100 meters away from me, I see, in front of the subway pillars, a pregnant brunette girl. She was very pregnant. She looked to be around due term. I sometimes find myself looking at pregnant women or parents with their children. I'm a girl, not a creep. I just like children and happy families. Makes me smile. I like to imagine myself as a mother, and that makes me happy. So I look at this woman. I can also hear the subway approaching and the wind blowing her ash dark hair as she looked into her phone, and with her free hand rubbing her baby belly. It made me smile. It made me feel happy for her, and wondered what gender the baby is. I wondered what she would name him. Having thoughts like that, how will the baby look like? Will he or she look like her mum or dad? Innocent stuff like that. But this fantasy image in my mind would be destroyed and chopped into pieces in a second as I see two skinny arms coming from behind the pillars as she was in front of, and pushed the pregnant lady on the train tracks. As soon as the subway exits the tunnel to reach the stop, I freeze with my mind but not my feet. I run for the life of me as I see the woman wobbling dizzy, holding her belly, throwing her purse back up and trying to climb back up. She screams, "Someone please help me, the train is coming, I can't climb up, please, I'm pregnant, please." As I run towards her, I scream from the bottom of my lungs, "Run inside the tunnel, run inside the tunnel, do it now, you must do it now, run inside the tunnel." When I said run inside the tunnel, I meant for her to run in the direction the subway was going, so that she would hide inside the tunnel, because the train would have stopped and not harm her. But that meant 100 meters for her to run, pregnant and injured. Very fast, I reach her the moment the subway just completely crushed her. I heard the bones crack, the blood, the horror. I did not have the stomach to approach to see the damage that has been done by those skinny arms that ended her life. I just couldn't erase the image of a happy young to-be mother, rubbing her baby belly, probably talking with her husband on the phone, to the lifeless body pushed to death way too soon. People were shocked, everyone was screaming, and the murderer was chased down but couldn't be caught until later that night. She was a psychotic woman, around 40 to 50 years old, that claimed to have had a bad day, lost her job. The woman looked like her last boss that kicked her out, and she was nervous. What was sickening was the explanation she gave the police for leaving the murder scene. She said she was looking for cheap pants, so she couldn't be bothered to stay there longer. The next day the police finds out the woman had tried to kill someone before this lady, another girl, similar in height and face to the one she killed. There are recordings of her pushing the first lady and recordings of her attempting 3 times in a row to push a girl on the train tracks. Fortunately, this girl was an athlete and managed to escape from her claws of death. She testified against her and she's been imprisoned for life. I haven't searched on her latest status since she's been convicted, so I hope she dies in there. Story 3, Third Soul. Considering today it's 31st of July and this happened on the 25th of July, this one is as fresh as it can be and equally traumatizing as the first 2. I live with my fiance now. He's a nurse at the ICU, and when he has day shifts I would wake up earlier than usual and go with him, even if it meant I would be an hour earlier for work, earlier than anyone. He calls an Uber and leaves me at the subway as he goes to work with the Uber. I take the subway from the Union Square in Bucharest at 7 AM. Every seat is taken, so I stand up, but pick the first set of doors right behind the conductor's room and just glance into my phone like a zombie listening to music. The first stop comes. It's called Izvor. It means river. At 7:05 I think to myself, I better check out and see which stop it is, because on the same line 2 trains circulate but go different directions. I wanted to make sure I took the right one by seeing the first stop. The moment I do that, I see the train exiting the tunnel and sort of slowing down. Not much, you could just feel the brakes being triggered. As soon as I see the light from outside the tunnel, I look outside the window doors, looking for the sign indicating which stop it is. When I did that, I saw the shadow of a person fly on the tracks. All I could see was a faint silhouette of a person and a bit of blue. Right then, I feel under my feet how the subway would crack something. I felt the subway floor make a small bump. I felt sick. I thought of the worst. I am a genuine animal lover and would do anything for them, but that moment I prayed to be an animal as I thought of the utter worst case scenario. All the doors are now locked, the only door that would open later being the one that I stand at. The train conductor goes on air and tells us, due to reasons objective to subway company name. The line from A to B will be closed. Please evacuate the train and change the lines. Everyone was furious, since everyone was going to work, and Romanians do not like to be scolded for being late or stuck in traffic in general. Right before opening my door, I managed to see the saddest scene ever unfold in front of my eyes. Most people don't ever take into consideration how train conductors feel in these situations. I know for sure I have changed my views on this matter. The train conductor goes outside his chamber, looked under his train, and put both hands on his head, grabbed his hair, almost pulling it off, and proceeded to fist punch his own head with both fists for 5 or 6 times. With tears in his eyes, he was saying, not too loud, but loud enough for me to hear it, "Why, brother, why? Why did you do it, man? How could you do this?" At that moment I understand. There was no chance to see an animal on the tracks, but a person, a man. We are evacuated by the police that arrive in 5 minutes, followed by the paramedics, firefighters and subway officials. Everyone goes on the other line on the other side. Some leave, some stay. Those who stayed wanted to know what happened, because, unlike me, they didn't catch the moment the man decided to end his life like I did. I see people crouched down trying to look under the train, some using their phones to film, take photos, some using flashlights. It made me sick, but I understood. There are some work bosses who don't care for shit if something like this, being stuck or late due to this in the subway, and will punish you. They only filmed or took pics for proof of the incident. I go there too, somehow still hoping that what I saw was not human. I crouched down with my eyes closed, holding my breath and then opening them. I see legs. I immediately started crying. I do not know why this one death marked me so bad, maybe because I caught the moment someone on his own commits suicide in front of my eyes. The firefighters put the flashlight on him, and at that moment I see all. I see his blue shirt, blue jeans, white sneakers. I see his grey hair and the beginning of baldness. I cry, holding a hand on my mouth, trying to hold the emotions in and pray for him. I could only think how this man was someone's father or grandfather. I don't see blood. I couldn't tell if he's been cut in half by the train. I didn't stay long to find out. The image of his lifeless body will haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. In fact, all these 3 victims, the man that died on my shoulder, the pregnant lady who's been murdered, the second I put my eyes on her to admire her, and the man that committed suicide by jumping in front of the train I was in, making me his direct and only witness of the act. Their faces will forever stay with me in a way not even their families will ever wish to know. These 3 secluded cases made me feel like the angel of death for them. All happened when I was there. All happened as soon as I looked at or after them. I know it's not my fault, but I am afraid to use the subway. You never know who will die next and how. Home invaders taken by surprise. This story happened when I was 12 years old. I'm a female and 25. The story I'm about to tell you, it might not be scary to most, but for me and my parents it was. I remember it was a Saturday night around 9 or 10 p.m. during summertime. I owned one dog at the time. His name is Benny. My parents decided that night that they feel like going for a walk around the block, walking Benny, and asked me whether I want to join them. I said no because I wanted to play PWI on my PC, Perfect World International. My parents were okay with leaving me alone, since the walk wouldn't take longer than 30 minutes tops. As my parents would get dressed to leave the house, I logged in PWI and looked around in my guild and global chat to see if anyone was on. For some reason no one was, so I decided to join my parents. I get dressed, I put Benny on his leash and we all leave. I'd like to mention that I live in an apartment building that had 10 floors and we lived on the very first floor. Not sure how to explain, but you have the basement of the building, then the first row of apartments. Basically you enter the building and already are facing apartments. I lived in the very first one. I remember always hating that because whoever would pass by our door, we would hear them at any time of the day or night. Whoever was lurking at night, we would hear them. It was somewhat eerie to live on floor 0. Anyway, we leave the house. My dad closes the door. We had 3 keyholes and a steel bar that would block the door from the inside. The bar covered half of the door. Precautions were my father's obsession. We exit the building and enjoy our walk. After 15 minutes, we realise the wind has changed from warm summer wind to incoming storm wind. My mum makes the call to go back home, as Benny already did all his duties. So we all return. We open the building door, climb the 5 stairs to our door and attempt to open it. And my father does the following: unlocks the first 3 locks and then attempts to unlock the metal bar that holds the door locked. At that moment my father pauses, turns around at us with the most serious face I've ever seen on him, and whispers to us to call the police and ring the neighbour's door. My mum goes to the second apartment, and the neighbour, who I will call Ted, comes out asking my father what happened. My dad whispered to him, covering the see-through hole of the door, "Someone is in our house. He or they are holding the door. Please stay here with my family and attempt to open it. I will be back." After saying that, I see my father rush all by himself around the building in the dark. I say dark because we didn't have a street light on the side of our apartment facing the block garden. My dad disappears in the darkness. I go outside too, not following him too much, but only to hear if he's in trouble. He's my dad, don't judge me. As soon as I get out, I hear him shout, "Hey, you, come back. Who the hell do you think you are?" I called the police. At the same time, I hear him shout. I look at Ted, who manages to open the door and enter the house. I go after them and enter my house. It no longer felt like my house. In just 15 minutes while we were walking, the home invaders made a complete mess of our house. All our shelves and wardrobes were pulled out, our clothes scattered all over the house. Benny's dry food was all over the floor, indicating they must have tripped in his bowls, probably not knowing we owned a dog. But what scared me the most was how organised they were. I say that because after seeing the disaster that they left behind, we knew it was impossible for just one person to hold the door still and organise what they want to take from them. I say organised because the thieves put in our living room, all packed and ready, what they wanted but couldn't steal. On the couch they placed our laptops, one of our TVs, my father's collection of coins, our phones, chargers, wallets, and even my father's camera. He's a photographer, and that week he had to attend a wedding. They didn't have enough time to steal all of that, so they just settled with some of my mom's jewellery and some pocket money. After seeing this, in my silly child mind, I rushed to my room to check my piggy bank. I always saved up money from whatever chores I did. It wasn't much, but it was my work and savings, and at that time I thought they stole it too. When I enter my room, I see the metal bars covering my windows are cut open and my window broken. This is how they entered, through my room. My room is the only room facing the side of the building and the one most secluded from view. Needless to say, I never felt safe in my own room, in which I had to live for the next 10 years of my life, until I moved in with my fiancée. The police arrive. They start throwing white dust. I have no idea what that is still. All over our house to find fingerprints. They take pictures, take our statements, analyse the room and window. They were unable to catch the home invaders, but were able to tell us that this invasion was not the only one in our neighbourhood. During that month, another 4 houses were broken into, one of them being the home of a cop, not related with the cops at our home. They told us that the invaders analysed their victims learned their schedule, even knew where the children's rooms were, as they seemed to be entering the houses through the children's windows. All the families affected by them had children. They did not expect us to be back that soon and panicked. Hence one of them was holding the door with his body so that the others could flee. The person after which my dad was shouting was probably the one holding the door and escaping last through my broken window. I don't know what could have happened if I didn't change my mind and give up on raiding for gears in PWI. I would probably have come face to face with these invaders. I am happy I didn't, and I hope to God I never ever meet with them. Period. Thank you to you for submitting these stories for tonight's edition. Now remember, my little hellhounds, if you want more content like this, then don't forget to subscribe. Good night, hellhounds. Hello, my little hellhounds, and welcome to Home of Scares. If you like paranormal or creepy let's not meet stories, then this is the channel for you. Don't forget to like it and subscribe. Creepy guy who tried to take me into the woods on a scouting trip. Submitted by Saders 27. I was about 12 years old at the time and a member of a unisex scouts group, one of about 4 girls in our troop. We went to a jamboree with loads of other scout groups and camped there for a few nights. During the day we did a range of activities, a lot of which were based in a wooded area very close to the area we were camping in. Every night there was some sort of entertainment for us to go to if we wanted to. On the first night, the other girls and I started talking to a group of older guys who were also camping with their troop for a few days. They were pretty nerdy and we weren't particularly attracted to them, but They seemed nice and we had a good laugh with them. Whenever we saw them for the next couple of days, we would say hi and chat when we could. It was nice to talk to some other boys than the ones in our group. The boys in our troop were older than me, and we were pretty protective of us girls. They made sure these other boys knew they were with us, and we felt pretty safe being at a scout event with the older boys watching over us. The night before we left, we had a disco. Everyone got dressed up and we went along to dance and to listen to the music. By this point, we had got to know the boys pretty well, or as well as we could have in a couple of days. At the disco, a couple of the boys asked if we wanted to go for a walk in view of the disco and just hang out away from the scout leaders. As it was our last night, me and another girl went off with them, but we weren't far from the disco and could hear and see everything that was going on. After a while, my friend needed the bathroom, so headed back towards the disco tent. I stayed where I was and kept hanging out with these boys. Big mistake. Looking back, I should have gone with her. How well did I really know these boys? But at 12 years old, I was pretty naive and didn't think anything bad would happen. They suggested we head back, but take a slightly longer route round so we could see the stars. Still within full view of the disco. Suddenly, one of the boys held my hand. I felt super uncomfortable, but was really shy back then and didn't know what to do. I saw him shine a light on our hands and wink at his mates, who very quickly disappeared. Now it was just me and him. I was even more uncomfortable. He proceeded to tell me he was really into me, even though he was 2 or 3 years older, and wanted to finish the trip on a high. He started to lead me towards the woods and further away from everyone else. I was inwardly panicking, freaking out, and not knowing what to say or do. I was in shock and frightened. I tried to pull my hand away, but he held it tighter. He stared forwards and kept telling me how beautiful I was and how he couldn't wait to have some alone time. At 12 years old, this is the last thing I wanted. I really felt that if I went with him, it wouldn't end well, but I was too scared to do anything. I didn't feel I could get away even if I tried. Then he started to sing along to a song from the disco, which was becoming fainter and fainter. Is this the way to Amarillo? I was terrified. I couldn't see any way out. In the midst of my panic, I suddenly heard something that filled me with utter relief. The boys from my troop were calling me and walking towards us. He let go of my hand. As soon as I felt him let go, I ran to the boys I knew, and they took me back to our camp. The next day we were leaving, and I was so relieved. We were waiting to get on the minibus home when I heard his voice behind me. He told me he had a great night, and it was a shame we got interrupted. He asked for my number. This was before cell phones, so he wanted my home number. One of the boys in my group answered for me, told him no, and it was best he left me alone. I'm 27 now, but still cannot listen to that song. If I hear it, my body is filled with dread, and I feel sick. Thankfully, I never saw him again, and I hope I never do. To the creepy guy who tried to lead me into the woods in the middle of the night, let's never meet again. The Strange Man in the Woods, submitted by Obi-Wan 420. I live in a small town in South Africa. Near my town there is a large patch of woods, and since the outbreak of coronavirus, I haven't been in the woods for a long time, until yesterday. So my friend called me to ask if I wanted to join him and a few other mates to play a game of paintball in the woods, and obviously I was keen. I got my paintball gear and gun and headed off to my mate's place. There was 6 of us: Chase, Liam, Matt, Joey, Stephen, and obviously me. We headed off to the woods, but made a few stops to fill up on petrol and get some gas for the paintball guns. When we finally got to the woods, we parked the cars, got in our gear and ventured out into the forest to find the perfect spot to paintball. Eventually we got deep enough and to an area with sufficient cover and space to play a good game of capture the flag. We played a couple of games, and since it's winter, it got dark really quickly, but we planned for this and brought our flashlights and decided to play a couple of night games, which is extremely hard especially in the forest we were in. During one match, Joey and I decided to sit out because we were both tired and just needed a quick breather, and the others continued to play from a significantly good distance away from us. While we were chilling, I was rolling up a joint. Yes, I'm a pothead. And Joey went to go take a piss a couple of meters away from me. While I was busy rolling, I had the flashlight pointing towards myself, since there was no other light to allow me to see what I was doing, and around me it was completely dark. I couldn't even see 2 meters ahead of myself because of how dark it was. Suddenly I heard footsteps coming my way, but I thought it was Joey, and I soon realized I couldn't see any light from his flashlight. So now I was more vigilant, but still relaxed, thinking he is trying to play a prank on me or something. But the footsteps stopped a few meters away from me. So I lifted my flashlight up and pointed it in the direction where I heard the footsteps, and scanned the area, but just saw bushes and trees, and I just thought it might be Joey hiding in the bushes or behind a tree, waiting to give me a jump scare. When I heard footsteps coming in the opposite direction, and when I looked, I could see it was Joey, because he was holding his flashlight. That's when I stopped what I was doing and picked up my flashlight and paintball gun, and when Joey reached me, I whispered, "Bro, I think there is someone over there." And Joey obviously didn't believe me and just said to me to stop being a baby. But he soon regretted saying that, because I decided to do one last scan of where I heard the footsteps, and to my horror I saw someone peeking and staring right at me from behind a tree, probably 10 or 11 meters away from us. I just shouted, "What the actual fuck?" And when Joey heard me say this, he looked at me, and then where the man looked, and instantly jumped up, picking up his paintball gun. We stared at the tree for at least 2 minutes, but it felt like forever until he stepped out from behind the tree. He was a large man, at least 6 foot, was honestly filthy, like he hasn't taken a bath in years. He was wearing baggy, ripped up jeans and just an old, dirty, zipped up bomber jacket. Plus, we could see that he was on something, or he was just bat shit crazy, and he was holding something behind his back. He finally said, "What are you guys doing out here when it is so dark?" We couldn't even answer him because of the shock we were in. Joey stuttered, with fear in his voice. We were just leaving, but the man nodded his head in disagreement and said, "No, you're not. Your friends are still playing the game." I felt a shiver down my spine. How about we play a game of our own while we wait for your friends? And that is when he finally showed us what he was hiding behind his back, and it was a large machete. That's when I knew we had to get out of there. So I aimed my paintball gun, and in the toughest way I could muster up, I told him, "Leave now, or I will shoot," even though I only had about 6 or 7 paintballs loaded, and Joey did the exact same thing by aiming his gun at the man, even though he had no paintballs in his gun. But he didn't even flinch, but did something that honestly made my skin crawl. He just smiled and said, "The game starts now," and suddenly he just rushed at us. So I told Joey to run while I fired my last bullet at him, and luckily I shot him in his head, which caused him to fall. So that was our chance to book it and link up with our other friends. As soon as we started running, we heard his footsteps again, and he was actually gaining on us. We could barely see, but we couldn't slow down because we knew what would happen if we did. So we just carried on sprinting, our hearts out, until we heard the other paintball guns being fired. So we knew we were close. Joey started shouting to get everyone's attention, and all of a sudden I heard a huge thud. Joey tripped and twisted his ankle. I turned around to help him up, and when I did, I could see the man running full sprint towards us. In that moment I thought it was going to be the end for us. But our friends heard our screams for help and rushed to us, and when they saw the man, they just started firing at him, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to take us all on, and he decided to turn around and disappear into the forest. We helped Joey up, rushed to get our stuff, and rushed to the cars. When we got to our friend's place, we helped Joey treat his ankle, and I proceeded to tell my friends everything that happened, and they were all creeped out. It's safe to say that the next time I'm in those woods, I will be more vigilant. Chased through the woods by a man with a crossbow, submitted by rats in corduroy. This happened a few years ago with my friend June when we were maybe 17 or 18. I'm now 23. We were out driving around late at night on country back roads. We were teenagers growing up in a rural area, so going for a drive was one of the main ways we passed the time. We were both into goth stuff and witchcraft at the time, so we pulled off the side of the road to walk around a small graveyard in the woods. It was impossible to see at night, but we'd gone there a few times in the day before, just to hang out. The whole area is heavily forested, but the path to the graveyard is short. It's right next to the road, just barely hidden in the woods. Anyway, we started slowly on the small loop that takes you around all the gravestones, using our flashlight to read the names and look at the carvings on the stones. I was very comforted by graveyards and the night at the time, so I was honestly very relaxed, and we mused about ghosts and deaths and whatnot, as goth teenagers do. About halfway around the loop, at the furthest point from the car, June got my attention, and she noticed a light in the woods. It looked far away, like it could have been a car on the road, so we turned away and kept walking. However, about 30 seconds later, she got my attention again, and the light was much closer and obviously quickly moving towards us. And then I heard the sound of someone crashing through the woods. It was obviously someone with a flashlight making a beeline towards us, and we backtracked and ran to the car. I unlocked it and climbed into the driver's seat, turning the car on as fast as I could. And right before the lights came on, this huge, grisly looking man, dressed head to toe in camouflage, carrying a huge crossbow and wearing a headlamp, busted out of the foliage and was coming right for the car. He has this maniac look in his eyes, and that just made me want to escape even more. I reversed as quickly as I could and peeled out of there. We didn't stop driving for a while, even though we never saw him following us. After we drove off, we both couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Finally, I think we both got too tired to stay out any longer, and we went back to our houses. But I still constantly think about how quickly he got to us. If we hadn't sprinted right when we did, he would have caught us as we were getting into the car. I literally slammed my door about a second before he came barreling out of the woods towards us. Plus the fact that there are no houses nearby. This person was waiting in the woods in full hunting gear with a weapon, and we clearly weren't animals, as we had a flashlight and there isn't a no trespassing sign in sight. The whole area around this graveyard is state park. I go out into the woods and into weird places in the night a lot, and I've seen some stuff I would consider supernatural that really scared me, but none of those things ever truly made me afraid to go into the woods like he did. I still go out on my own, but I really never let my guard down like I used to. Well, my little hellhounds, I hope you enjoyed tonight's video. If you would like to see more content like this, please subscribe and don't forget to drop a like. Hello, my little hellhounds. Welcome to Home of Scares. If you like the chills running down your spine and to be scared, fueled with anxiety, then join us twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And don't forget to increase your anxiety levels. Just make sure you subscribe. Sleep tight, my hellhounds. Tinder date tried to kill me. Posted by Nameless Apparition. This was November 2016 in Glasgow, Scotland. I was desperate, I must admit. I'd been single and alone for some time, and it was driving me crazy. That's when I met Laura. She came across as a very sweet girl and all, but she was in a hurry to meet me, so I did. She insisted we go to the pub. No fancy dates were necessary for her. I don't mind this. At first glance, I knew I'd been swindled. She looked different from what I'd saw before, but I didn't mind. I was just happy to have a date. I'm not exactly good looking myself. I gave her a chance to redeem herself. We got talking, and after a few beers, things started to get more intimate. Before I go further, she was quite an overweight girl with long dark hair, and she had eyeshadow similar to Amy Winehouse. She said she was a huge fan. I'd asked her about her hobbies and interests, etc., but she asked me to talk more about myself. I told her about my job, and she yawned sarcastically. Let's talk about your sex life, she said. She had slipped her foot out of her shoe and started rubbing my groin with her bare foot. Needless to say, I was aroused. So yeah, I didn't have much to say in that department, as it had been a while since I had sex. I was very honest with her. I asked about hers, and she said she has her kinks, and that she's done things that I'd never have imagined. Wanna see what I can do? She said, let's go to my place. So at this point I was starting to feel very drunk, which I was amazed at this. I was only on to my 4th pint. I did have 2 shots though, and put it down to this. We'd waited for a taxi. She was holding my hand excitedly, whispering into my ear that she was going to do some things to me that I'd never experienced before. In a way, I actually couldn't wait to just sleep. My head felt heavier than the rest of my body. It was like the ground was moving beneath my feet. The rest was a blur. I couldn't even remember getting into the taxi, but I do remember falling down the stairs, and she was above me laughing at me. Come on, she said, get your sexy ass up here. I struggled up the stairs, and before I know it, from what I remember, I was in her bedroom naked. It was like I'd blacked out. I tried to sit up, only to find myself tied to the bed by my arms and legs. Then she entered the room, dressed in bondage gear. I was deeply aroused, but confused at the same time. She performed sex acts on me before having full intercourse. I lay there delighted. Don't get me wrong, but something still felt off about it all. I had dozed off for a bit, and I'd been woken up by a weird screeching sound. What are you doing? I said as she was wrapping up my legs with cling film. Hush now, she said. This is the best bit. I was no longer tied to the bed, but I felt very numb and couldn't move my arms and legs. She kept wrapping me up from my legs upwards. I was screaming at her to stop, and she had placed some cling film in my mouth to shut me up. I was struggling to breathe at this point and had tried my best to dislodge the ball of cling film from my mouth. Eventually, I was totally wrapped from head to toe. I could barely see outside the cling film. She told me that this was my punishment for being terrible in bed, and that she has many other victims just like me, all wrapped up, waiting to die. She left the room, and I gave out some muffled screams. Then I felt myself slowly fading away. I woke up what was now the next day, now able to breathe. This time there were people looking at me. They'd removed most of the cling film and had resuscitated me. I wasn't aware of this till they told me. It had turned out that I wasn't actually at Laura's flat, but an old-fashioned hotel. The police were all over me, asking me questions about what had happened. I attempted to show them her Tinder profile, but she had deleted the page. I am grateful to my rescuers that had saved me, but forever traumatized by this incident, and I end up with panic attacks when I see people that are similar to her. It took me a few years to finally trust people enough to go on dates, but I am still on the road to recovery mentally. I'm just glad that I'm still alive, but wondering if she's still out there and if there are others like me that didn't make it. I was almost kidnapped in front of my parents. Posted by Super Sneaky Kitty 3. This was back in November of 2018, and it takes place in North Carolina. I was 14 at the time. My family and I had just moved across states. We had just gotten to the city where we planned on living after a long road trip. We were all hungry, so decided to grab dinner before we went to pick up the keys to our new house. We went to this local pizza shop since we had our dogs with us. Because we hadn't moved into our house yet, we decided to eat in the car. I'm a pretty fast eater compared to the rest of my family, so I finished way before them. After I was done, I decided to bring my puppy out to do her business. We were standing just a little ways up from the car, playing in the leaves on the ground. I grew up in Florida, so I wasn't used to seeing piles of autumn leaves, so was just living my best life, not paying attention to my surroundings, when a man taps on my shoulder. My dog notices him and immediately tries to jump on him, as she does with anyone. So I pull her back while I'm backing away from him. He looks to be in his mid-40s to 50s. He smiles creepily at me, like it was forced. He says in his scruffy southern voice, "You have my dog, my border collie." Immediately a red flag goes off in my mind, as my dog looks very obviously like a boxer, nothing like a border collie. Now, let me tell you, I'm horrible at confrontation, so I just say nervously, "I think you're mistaken, sir. This is my dog," not even telling him how my dog does not look anything like what he was describing. I look over to my parents' car that was just a couple of feet ahead of me, unsure what to do. They hadn't even noticed the man approach me. They were on their phones. The man now asks me, "Well, would you be able to come help me look for my dog?" I can feel my stomach drop in that moment. I still don't want to make a scene, as I'm probably overreacting, but I have read my fair share of kidnapping and sex trafficking horror stories. So I have an idea in the back of my mind on what's going down. He then says something along the lines of, "I have some money in my truck for you if I went with him." My hands are sweating at this point. This is something straight out of a Reddit thread. He points over to a very sketchy, run-down looking truck. I tell him I'm busy and have to go, but best of luck to finding his dog. Still trying to keep him on my good side. Looking back on it now, I don't know why I didn't tell him my parents were right there. If I would have, I think he would have backed off. I overly worry about what others might think, so I was just trying to be polite and not make him mad. He then decides to grab my dog's leash and say he had dog treats at his truck and starts to walk away with my dog. I pull the leash away from him and say sternly, "I have to go now." As I start walking away, he then grabs my wrist and rips the leash out of my hands, throwing it to the ground. He starts pulling me with him, mumbling something like, "Just come see what I have for you." My dog, the sweet good girl she is, follows after us and starts barking, while he starts to drag me with him. I am pretty small, 5'4", and have no upper body strength, so I just start screaming to let go of me. My parents alarmed, hearing me scream and our dog chasing after me barking. See this man pulling their daughter against her will. They immediately start sprinting after me. I start screaming, "Mom, Dad." I think he's got alarmed when he heard me yell out, "Mum," as she starts running towards us. The sudden realization that my parents were right there in their car the whole time. He makes a run for it, and we didn't run after him. My parents were just glad they had me. This is definitely not a good way to start off our new life in North Carolina. Not even have lived there a day yet. I do not wish this to ever happen to anyone, as it was terrifying. But my advice for you is, don't be afraid to use your words. Even if they offend the person, then is not the time to worry about what others think. Old house owner is a very, very creepy man. Posted by Taco Bell Fury. This story happened about 4 years ago when I was 15 years old and we moved into this house. Sorry about grammar and stuff, me no good at it. Backstory: we live in a very small tourist town. School K-12 in one building and population of of 700, not during tourist season, kind of small. There was this weird druggie that everyone knew and hated. He lived in one of his parents' houses and did not pay rent, so they decided to kick him out. My parents were friends with the family and helped take care of his kids when he couldn't, so we were on pretty good terms. They gave the druggie, I'll call him D for short, 30 days to move out for failing to pay a single rent check in his miserable life. We weren't doing very well at all financially and needed somewhere to stay or rent. We began talking to Dee's parents about the house, and they said we could begin renting to buy as soon as he moves out. The 30-day mark came around, and we asked Dee if he was ready, and he acted like he knew nothing about what we were talking about. So his parents said they were just going to give him some extra days and help him move his stuff. So we waited another month. At this point, the current place we were staying, we had to move out of in a few days. We went to the house and went inside to see all of Dee's stuff still there. We decided we couldn't wait and just bagged his stuff up and told him to pick it up. Fast forward about a year. We always heard scurrying like mice and stuff in the ceiling, but we have a ton of strange animals like mice, snakes, lizards, chinchillas, etc. One of our 4 snakes went missing from its closed tank, with clips holding down the lid. There were no holes anywhere to be found. We didn't think anything of it, but it was a bit strange. Eventually, we started hearing louder sounds, and our dad said it was just the house settling. Stuff was disappearing from the fridge. Electrical bills went up. We smelt smoke, etc. Us kids got blamed for all of it and got our phones and my PC taken away. But the power bill was still up, and I also got blamed for smoking in the house, which my parents had no reason to believe or prompt this accusation. So I was grounded until graduation. I was mad now because I did not smoke in our house. I was unbelievably bored one day, not being able to do anything. So I decided to explore the attic. I opened the door. Holy shit. My mum then came right up the ladder, ready to beat me, and saw it too. A bed, microwave, mini fridge, cigarettes, unsmoked blunts, etc. Guess who? It's Druggy. He then came back that night through my little sister's window. He was higher than I've ever seen a person and admitted to a bunch of stuff, and we recorded it all. He took the snake and let it loose to get rid of the mice. He smoked in our house. He snuck in through my little sister's room every night. But none of this puts this in let's not meet now, does it? In court, He then admitted to making a small hole in the floor of the attic to watch my little 11-year-old sister sleep at night. We changed all locks, got a Ring doorbell, placed higher security locks on all the windows, and more. And the worst part of it all, this creep only got 6 months probation for marijuana possession, which wasn't yet legal in my state. He got only 1 year of prison for breaking and entering for an entire year, almost every day. What kind of bullshit system is that? He did have to pay a pretty heavy fine for damages and had to pay us back a year's worth of electric bills. We are now out of debt and my parents are living steadily because he finally finished paying all the fines to us. My sister has to go to a therapist twice a week and might never get a good night's sleep again. He argued with me on the first date and called me a cheat. Posted by Jailbait Janet. I met this guy in a nightclub. We'd got on really well and even kissed. He was a lot older than me. I'm 23. He's almost 30. After a few texts, we'd arranged to meet up the following week. Now, I've only known this guy literally a week when all this happened. He took me to a really posh restaurant. He didn't tell me where the date was going to be, but only to meet him at the train station. He was dressed very smart, with a shirt and tie. I was wearing a casual looking dress, so I felt really out of place. I apologized for this. He seemed okay with it. We had dinner and things were going well. I was a little nervous. First date nerves, additional to the anxiety I already had. I'd excused myself and went to the toilet to calm my nerves. So, we were into dessert when he asked me if I had a boyfriend or other boyfriends, to which I replied no. He pulled his glasses off and stared me down. You have 4 boyfriends. I saw it on Facebook. Why are you looking at my Facebook? I said. He said he'd done his research on me while I was in the toilet. He asked who certain names were. Why were they messaging me on a regular basis? I told him they were friends from school, but he failed to believe me. He said that girls can't simply be friends with boys without sex being involved. I'd asked him what any of this had to do with him, and he said to me, well, if you want this relationship to continue, you should let go of them all. We'd ended up in a debate full row over this. I told him to not get ahead of himself, and this was the first date, and only a week from meeting him. I called off dessert and left. He tried to grab my arm to stop me leaving, so I poured my drink over his head and ran off as fast as I could. I was at the bus stop sobbing my eyes out when he had tried to phone me. I put my phone on silent. When I got home, I had over 40 missed calls. I sent him a text telling him to stop or I'd report him to the police. I then received a total of 100 texts from him calling me a slut and a cheating whore. He also mocked me for how I dressed, saying that he's a man of class and that I've offended him with dressing like a slut. I thought my dress was reasonable, as I was never into short skirts or dressing glamorously. He then went onto Facebook and posted my profile pic in an attempt to expose me, saying I was a 2-time cheating slut and warning people to avoid dating me, and that I'd ordered expensive meals on the date and left him to pay the bill. This left me horrified and didn't exactly help my anxiety. I had reported him to the police, but all they'd done was take down notes and told me to report again if I hear any more from him. He had stopped after my dad saw how upset I was getting, and he phoned him up and threatened to beat the hell out of him. Also, people complained about him on Facebook and sent him hate mail, forcing him to delete his profile. It took me a while to get outside the house, let alone go on dates again, but I'm slowly and surely getting there. Stalker Jill was waiting for me at the bus stop for over an hour. Posted by Mystery Protagonist. This is all about a girl that I met on the bus on the way to work. She was an average looking ginger-headed girl, but dressed herself up to look really pretty. By coincidence, she'd be on the same bus every single day. One day, the bus was very busy, and I'd ended up sitting next to her. I was minding my own business when she started chatting me up. She seemed quite interesting, but a little over enthusiastic about being on the dating scene, asking if I was single and stuff. We'd meet again on my way back to work, and this became a routine for the next few months. So after a brief few months of conversations, she said to me, "So you gonna ask me out, or what?" So I did. I didn't see her as girlfriend material. She was a bit too glamorous for me. I felt flattered and all, but I'd arranged a date with her anyway, so we had a meal together after work, and it all went well, and I'd ended up back at her place. I was confused though, 'cause her place was nowhere near where I lived. We'd go on the same bus every day on our way to work, so I had a feeling this wasn't her house. She'd normally be 2 stops away from me. This was way too far from the bus stop and had a train station next to it. I'd seen some toys, obviously for a toddler, and I'd asked her about them. She said it was for her niece. This didn't all add up, 'cause she said she was an only child. So, safe to say, you can use your imagination about what happened next. But after we'd cuddled up and stuff, and she had asked me to leave, she said she had to work in the morning and needed her sleep, which was fair enough. After this, I received a ton of texts from her talking about what a great night she had. I'd meant to ask her about the house we'd went to and some other things that didn't match up, but for some reason my instincts were telling me not to ask. One day I'd slept in and I'd caught a later bus. She just happened to get on that bus. I just put it down to coincidence. I was too busy trying not to be late for it to even cross my mind. But there came a point where I was becoming stressed out with my job, and due to lack of enthusiasm, I'd been late a lot. Going to work became a chore. Also, as much as I'd grown to like Jill, I was getting fed up seeing her face every day and her constant texting. We went on a few dates together, but when I'd looked her up and made a friend request to add her on Facebook, I noticed she had already changed her status to in a relationship. Not only that, she had half a dozen photos of me and her together. I scratched my head at this point, as I can't remember even getting a photo taken with her. According to her, we'd been on holiday together, and she'd boast about having sex with me constantly. I felt baffled and so embarrassed and disgusted at the same time. I couldn't wait to confront her on this, but didn't even know where to begin. So, on this day in particular, I decided to be late on purpose, and as it happens, she got on the bus. I couldn't wait to confront her on everything. I showed her the Facebook page and she dismissed it as a joke, claimed it was done for laughs. I told her it wasn't really funny, and in fact really weird and creepy as hell. We'd ended up in a heated argument about it that nearly got us thrown off the bus. I told her to take down the pictures that were clearly photoshops taken from my own profile and edited. I told her not to talk to me again, and in the future get a different bus. She refused and said, "Why should I?" She didn't even explain herself as to why she done it. She just acted as if she was justified to do what she done. I'd asked her to stay well out of my way in future. On the way back to work, I decided to head to the pub with my workmate to get my head around it all. I was on my way to the bus stop with my mate and she was there. Luckily, she never saw me, so we looked at her from the distance. I'd waited till the bus passed by and decided to run, only she had let the bus go by. A few buses passed and she was still waiting around, waiting for me. I got a taxi home that day. I'd reached out to a few people on Facebook group about her and asked if anyone had encountered her before, and it turned out that she had quite the reputation. She'd stalked and photoshopped many people that she'd fell for. Also, I found out that the house she took me to was an ex-boyfriend of hers, or should I say, ex-victim. She'd copied his keys so she could sneak around his house whenever he was away. He'd be away serving in the army for several months on end. Police are very useless when it comes to stalking, and they'd asked me to speak to a lawyer. Instead, it was more of a legal matter than a criminal offence. The most they could do was ask her to delete the fake photos of me and the slandering posts. By this point, she was spreading all sorts of rumours about me, claiming that I'd got her pregnant and asked her for an abortion, and I'd forced her to have sex with me, and I was the stalker. She'd still be on the same bus, but over time I'd end up getting taxis to work, and eventually I'd learn to drive, so at least one plus side came from it all. I'd blocked her number. On other numbers, I decided to change my number. Eventually, I'd moved house altogether. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more creepy dating stories like this, then please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. Sleep tight, hellhounds. Hello, my little hellhounds. Welcome to Home of Scares. If you like scary content, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe. The Chain Smoker. Posted by No Just No. This happened to me 6 years ago and will haunt me for the rest of my life. I grew up in one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in all of North America. The neighborhood was initially supposed to house 12,000 people, but by the time I was 12 years old, it had a population of around 30,000 people. It was one of Toronto's poorest neighborhoods, with 50% of the population being under the poverty line, though the crime rate was not nearly as high as you'd expect it to be. The neighborhood was mostly made up of immigrants and refugees looking to find a better life, my family included. It was summer break between 5th and 6th grade, and my cousins, who happened to live in the same apartment complex, were at our place watching movies. I was getting hungry, so I grabbed some money and headed for the convenience store to get snacks. It was around 7 p.m, so the sun was still up and there was an hour and a half left of light. The convenience store was half a block away, so I walked it. When I got to the parking lot of the residential building the store was in, I noticed a man wearing a black hoodie with horizontal green stripes standing in the corner of the parking lot. There was nothing too noticeable about the man except that he was smoking directly under a no smoking sign. Nothing uncommon in that neighborhood, just kind of ironic. I walk up the steps and into the cramped convenience store. There might have been 7 people in there, but it looked as if it was already almost full. Probably as big as a mid-sized apartment, and was already stocked up to the ceiling. Point is, if anyone enters, everyone in the store knows. So I come in, and directly to the left of the entrance is a shelf packed with many different varieties of candy. I was like any child who has 20 different varieties of candy laid out in front of them, but only has the budget for 2. Lost in thought, at the moment I forget about the man who was smoking. He enters through the door. He walks into the nook of the store behind me, where they keep all of the flatbread. I can feel his gaze on the back of my head. I quickly decide on the snacks, pay, and leave. I walk out, down the steps, and to the sidewalk on the other side of the narrow parking lot. When I hear the chimes of the exit door, I glance behind me to see who is exiting the store, and I am a shade under petrified when I see the man exit the store, especially when I notice he is carrying nothing in his hands. I quicken my pace just a tad and reason with myself that he just bought another pack of cigarettes and just put it in his pockets. That idea has barely crossed my mind by the time I am halfway back to my building. I turn around to see if he is still there. He is maybe 15 feet away from me when we make eye contact. He has his hood off and I can see his face clearly. He looks to be Afghan. There were a lot of those since the neighbourhood was a hot spot for refugees, and at the time Afghanistan was doing really badly. He has scars covering his face and is balding on top. He couldn't have been too tall because he wasn't much taller than 6th grade me, so like 5'4" or 5'6". I spin back around and start to speed up, and I hear footsteps behind me quicken. By the time we got to the D-shaped driveway to my building, we were speed walking. Remember, it's broad day and there are plenty of people around, and a man chasing a kid around is weird to anybody. As soon as we hit the split in the sidewalk which separates the driveway and the straight path, I start sprinting at full speed to my building. Luckily, there was someone buzzing in at that exact moment, and I slipped in the door behind him. I quickly whirl around and pull the pneumatic glass door shut. When I look up, I see the man, seconds too late, on the other side of the glass. The look on his face still scares me. He stared at me with an expression of anger I had never seen before, nor have seen since. I run to the elevators and push the button. He starts rattling the door. The expression on his face was still sinister. When the elevator comes, he understands that he won't catch me. He leads the way we came. Hey, don't worry, I'm a good guy. Hosted by Pippa Pipe. Hi, first of all, I just want to say English is my second language, so please forgive me if I make any mistakes with grammar or spellings. In this story I'm about to tell you all. As a backstory, I'm from Malaysia, and this story happened in one of the international airports there. I came from the East Malaysia, and I was a student at one of the local universities in Peninsular Malaysia. You can't travel to Peninsular Malaysia by land because the Peninsula and East Malaysia is separated by the South China Sea. So, of course, the fastest way to get to the peninsula is by flight, and for some reason I really liked taking the last flight of the night to get to my destination. I usually travelled alone, and I mostly keep to myself, as I am an introvert and don't really like talking to strangers. Before that night, I haven't really encountered any problems with weird people, as the airport tended to be busy, and I always stand in an area filled with other people minding their own business, and in flight I would just read or listen to some music. I also tended to just ignore the person sitting next to me. One night my flight was unfortunately delayed. We were supposed to reach our destination close to midnight, but with the delay we would reach the airport close to 2 a.m. I remember being frustrated because I know it will be hard to get an Uber that late. I sighed and then just decided that I would spend the night at the airport and grab an Uber the next morning to my university. No big deal, I thought. People do this all the time, I thought, so I relaxed into my seat. I forgot to mention that during the flight I was supposed to seat in the middle, but when everyone was seated, I noticed that the aisle seat was empty. I moved there. This was when I noticed a guy sitting on the window seat was acting strange. He kept looking at me and was trying to get my attention, but I ignored him with all my might because I was just tired and don't really want to have a conversation with a stranger. I just closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I remember it was really cold inside and was thinking about just turning off the AC on top of my seat, but didn't really want to move because then the guy would know I'm awake and I will be forced to engage in a conversation with him. It was a 2.5 hour flight after all, and I don't want to have a conversation during the flight. Then suddenly I feel a whole lot colder than before, and I open my eyes just a little to figure out what's going on. Then I saw the guy actually adjusting both the AC from the top of his seat and also the AC from the middle seat to face me. I got very annoyed, but I'm not actually someone who likes to confront people for anything, so I just sucked it up and closed my eyes, even though I was now shivering. and just sort of hugged myself and continued to ignore this guy. I honestly don't know what the guy was thinking doing that to me. I thought he was done doing whatever he was doing and wouldn't bother me anymore after that, right? After all, I didn't respond to whatever the heck he was doing, even though I am suffering in silence now from the cold. However, when the air hostess started to distribute the prepaid meals to the passengers, and he noticed that I didn't have a meal when he got his, he suddenly tapped my shoulder, and I just tensed up and looked at him in alarm, because I really don't like being touched by people due to some childhood trauma. But this guy doesn't seem to notice my reaction to him and just smiled at me. Hey, I noticed that you don't have a meal. Aren't you hungry? You know what? You can have my meal, he said, and I was just looking at him before saying, no, it's okay, and smiled uncomfortably. But he insisted and even got me to lower my table and forcing me to accept his meal. Then he ordered another meal for himself and started telling me that he can't eat alone after seeing me. He said he felt sorry for me and that it was in his nature to help people, and then he just watched me eating his meal with a big grin on his face. He didn't even touch his meal until after I was done. Now, if the meal wasn't prepared by the airline and it was still sealed, I would definitely think he put something in the meal. But then I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe he really was just trying to be helpful, even though I felt extremely uncomfortable and he was being a little forceful. He even moved to the middle seat to be closer to me. He then asked me what my name was and told me his name was Sam and that he worked somewhere in the peninsula. I just nodded, and then he asked me where I was from and why I was going to the peninsula. I gave him a short but honest answer just to be polite. When I told him I was a student at one of the local universities there, he then asked me how I was going to get to my university at this hour. I stupidly said, "Oh, I'm just going to spend the night at the airport. I'm used to it." "What? No, that's too dangerous for a girl as pretty as you," he said before continuing. "You know what? My brother has a place not far from the airport. Why don't you stay with me?" "Oh, don't worry, my sister-in-law is there. You wouldn't be alone." "Don't worry, I'm a good person," he said, still with that big grin on his face. I immediately became afraid and quickly said no while shaking my head. There will be a lot of people at the airport. I'm used to it, I said, but he ignored me and began to chatter happily, not caring whether I answered him or not. At one point he even asked me if I was single and asked for my phone number, and I just gave it to him, but was planning to block his number if he ever tried to contact me or something. He even made a few comments about my looks and how he found me so cute and that I looked so lost. So he just had to say something to me. At this point, I began thinking about my options. For some reason, I didn't think about approaching one of the air hostesses for help, because technically he hadn't done anything wrong to me, but I felt scared anyhow. I decided that I would get out as fast as I can as soon as we landed and ditch this guy just to be safe. I don't know, maybe I'm just being an idiot, but I have had several encounters with creepy people before that it was so bad that my few friends and cousins called me the weirdo magnet due to my naivety. So no, I'm not taking any chances. After all, I was a first year student and had just started university, and I didn't have anyone that I can really call my friends yet. So yeah, I'm on my own. So back to the story. The plane landed and I tried to get out as fast as I can, but I have a hand carry luggage and it was slowing me down. Sam was standing behind me the whole time, and once we get on the ground, he actually held my hand as if it was the most natural thing to do. I froze. I was really scared and I honestly didn't know what to do. I absolutely hated it when people touched me. My family never hugged me, and my very few friends knew that I hated being touched unless I told them it's okay to touch me. And this stranger just grabbed hold of my hand without saying anything. I know I should do something, maybe scream for help, but I just stood there and froze, like the idiot that I am. I just followed this stranger. Then we walked past the toilet and I suddenly got an idea. I told Sam that I needed to go to the toilet. At first he said no time because his brother is here and we needed to hurry up, but I insisted on going and said I really have to pee, and I wasn't lying either. So he sighed and said okay. I got hopeful, maybe I can escape from this guy, so I started to drag my stupid luggage to the toilet, but this guy stopped me and told me he can look after my luggage for me. I said no thanks, but he just grabbed my luggage from my hand and told me to hurry up. So I walked to the toilet and stayed there for a bit, panicking. I thought about ditching my luggage and trying to escape without it, but then I remembered that my laptop was inside that luggage and it has all my important documents that I needed for my study. I tried to call somebody, but my phone was dead. I started to tear up a bit and decided to just ditch my stupid luggage and run away somehow. But I must have taken too much time in the toilet, because then I heard someone enter the toilet and called my name. Yeah, it was Sam. My heart dropped. I slowly got out from the toilet, fully convinced that this was it for me. I'm doomed. Now, you would think that I could ask for someone's help, or just approach one of the staff for help. I know I should, but as soon as he touched me, my skin crawled, and I just got really scared again. And since it was already very late, and we were really the last flight to arrive that night, there were very few staff around, and those that were working were engaged in something else, or were surrounded by other passengers, probably asking for help about accommodation for the night or something. I just watched them helplessly, hoping someone might notice my distress, but everyone just ignored me. While walking towards his brother's car, he told me to tell his brother that I am his girlfriend and just to stay quiet and he'll do all the talking. Then I thought maybe I could ask his brother for help and just send me to my university instead of going wherever this guy is planning to take me. But then I started thinking that what if his brother doesn't believe me? I mean, between family and a stranger, who would you believe, right? Plus, maybe I am being stupid, and Sam was really helping me, even though he was forceful and wouldn't let go of me. Maybe he was just overly nice. Seeing no other choice, I sadly got into the car with them. Now, I'm not good with cars, but I remember the car I got into with these strangers is a black double cabin Hilux, but I didn't see the plate number, so we drove for about an hour, and all the time I was scared this guy wouldn't let my hand go. I noticed the brother keep looking at me through the mirror, and I was even more scared and uncomfortable. Then they brought me to this condo. I was hoping that there really was a sister-in-law, and that all of this was just a huge, stupid misunderstanding. But then his brother told me that his wife is not home and that she was visiting some family member and will only be back tomorrow. I don't know what to think anymore, so Sam told me I can stay in his room, and tomorrow morning he'd take me back to my university. I didn't really want to go to his room, but I don't really want to stay in the living room with two men that I don't know. He showed me to his room and then handed me my luggage back, and I just locked the door. So I just sit in his bed looking at the door. My heart was pounding like mad. For a while, nothing happened. Then I heard a knock on the door. I tried to be quiet, because maybe whoever it was will leave me alone, thinking I had gone to sleep. "It's Sam. Are you awake?" he said in a quiet voice. "I just needed to talk to you for a bit." When I didn't say anything, I heard the doorknob was being turned, but I locked it so he can't get in. Then it went quiet again for a bit, until I heard the jingle of a key and my heart dropped. When I realized he had a key and was trying to get inside, I hurriedly told him to wait when I opened the door just a bit. Sam was there, smiling at me again. "Oh, I thought you were sleeping. Why did you lock the door?" he asked. "What do you want?" "I'm tired. I just really want to rest," I told him, and tried to shut the door, but he pushed the door and prevented me from shutting the door properly. "Sam, please just leave me alone for now. I'm really tired," I told him, but he wouldn't budge. "Hey, what's wrong? I'm really a good person. You have nothing to fear from me. You can trust me," he said. At this point I got another idea. "Oh yeah? Prove it. Give me your IC, Malaysian identification card," I said, and to my surprise, he said okay, and he really did give me his IC. "See, I'm not lying to you," he told me. So yeah, I got his card and saw his name really was Sam, but that doesn't mean anything. The card seems legit, but he is still a stranger to me. Long story short, he got inside the room and locked the door behind him. So it was just him and me, trapped inside the room. He tried to have a conversation with me and tried to get me to sit down with him on the bed. But as soon as he tried to get close to me, I just stood up and tried to get to the door, in which point he proceeded to grab my hand, and I tried to get away from him. And I finally screamed and told him to go away. I don't remember much about what happened next, but the next thing I know, I heard his brother's voice calling for us and asking what happened, and he was banging on the door. Now I was crying hysterically and struggled to open the door, while Sam just sat on his bed looking at me, seemingly stunned, as if he didn't do anything wrong. I finally managed to get the door open, and at this point I was sobbing and told his brother I wanted to leave now, and that I didn't want to be there anymore. Somehow I convinced his brother to just drive me to the university. Of course the gate was locked, and the security guard there told me that I had to walk to my dorm. because he can't let any car inside after midnight, and I just said it was fine and walked the rest of the way. But I didn't care and didn't want his brother to find out where I stayed for fear that they might come back and search for me. I was exhausted, and I remember telling my friends back home about what happened the next day after getting some much needed rest, and they dismissed it and saying that I was being dramatic and that it was actually romantic. Yeah, they actually think it was romantic, and I missed a good opportunity to find a boyfriend, and I was like, what the heck? Which part was romantic? The part where he practically dragged me to come with him, even though I repeatedly said no, or the part where he locked me in his room with him? What the actual fuck? Oh, and I still had his IC, but kind of forgot I had it with me until I arrived at my room, and kind of just lost it and cried silently and realised I was still holding his damn IC and cried harder, waking up my roommates. I didn't know them that much, but they kind of helped me, and I told them bits and pieces of what happened to me, but honestly I just wanted to sleep and forget anything ever happened. For a week I lived in terror, and I refused to go out of the dorm in fear that Sam and his brother might come back. Sam did text me and called me a few times asking about his IC, and asked me to hang out with him and his brother again, as if nothing happened and everything was fucking fine. And then he told me he went to my university looking for me, and I freaked out. I asked my roommates to drop his card with the security guard and told Sam to just pick it up there, but he never came. I blocked his number after that. I ended up dropping out of the university a few weeks later, but for a different reason, unrelated to this story, and moved back with my family in East Malaysia. Now, I don't know if I'm actually being over dramatic about what happened that night, and I don't really care if anyone believes me, but it felt good to finally let this off my chest, and I don't really know what would have happened that night if I didn't scream and convinced his brother to send me back to my university. But Sam, the supposedly good guy, let's never meet again, ever. I, a pizza guy, intercepted a kidnapping during a delivery hosted by Enough Pizza Now. I deliver pizza, and I'd been having a really busy night, non-stop, back and forth, without any time to even pause to take a leak. I'd been so busy that I wasn't really thinking about bathroom breaks, but we're also going through a bit of a heat wave in our area, so I've been drinking copious amounts of water. All of a sudden, as I was driving to this particular delivery, the urge to go hit me, like things went from 0 to 60 in an instant. Thankfully, I was close to the customer, so could get this one over quickly, or so I thought. I pulled up to the house, and it was an area I'd delivered in before, so I could immediately see that something wasn't right. All the lights were off in the house, not even the glow of a television or anything. It was extra apparent because the street light closest to the door happened to be out of order, and on top of it all, the block was dead quiet. This is a big university area, and obviously there aren't many student renters in July, but there had to be at least one person because someone ordered this pizza. Maybe they just liked sitting in the dark, or they were out in the yard. Whatever, I just didn't want to get out of my car and knock on a quiet house in the middle of the night around 9:30 p.m. without first checking that I had the correct address and the customer was inside. It was scorching that night, even after sundown. My car's AC is a joke, and the piping hot pizzas don't help things much. So I have to try and open the car door as infrequently as possible to keep any cool air in. I called the number the customer provided, and the voice on the other end said, kind of brusquely and out of breath, "Yeah." I just tried to keep it clear and concise. "Hey, it's your pizza out front, but there doesn't appear to be anybody home." And the customer replied, still gasping for air, "Yeah, I'm not home." I had to pee so badly by that point that I was much less patient than I'd otherwise be with a customer right out of the gate. "Well, then we're going to have to terminate the order because I've arrived in the stated delivery window and you were supposed to pay in cash, so I don't know what to tell you. Plan ahead next time." I instantly regretted letting my bladder do the talking for me, as the voice on the other end came through more clearly as a young, bubbly, and very distraught girl who couldn't have been older than 20 or 25. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was running down the street, so I could barely hear you," she cried. "I just switched you out of my AirPods. Is that better? Sorry, I completely lost track of time at work, but I knew you were coming. That's why I'm literally running home right now." Please don't leave. I'm starving and I don't have a car. Seriously, please don't leave. 5 minutes tops, okay? I know what it's like to be hungry and running late and have no car, but not to live near any restaurants. Plus, when I heard her voice, I began to remember more specifically having delivered to this place a couple of times before, and she's always been perfectly nice. Now I felt bad for snapping at her. I tried to walk it back while simultaneously looking out my window for potential spots to pee. No, my bad. I'm letting the heat get to me and it's not your fault. No need to rush. See you when you get here. I hung up while surveying the street. Was starting to think I was really out of luck. All the other houses had people in them and were close together, so there were no clumps of trees or out of the way patches of land or anything. Of course, I had just tossed my empty water bottle at the last delivery because I'm an idiot. Finally, I decided it was escalating to the point of emergency, and the safest bet was to use a bush in front of the woman's house. She wasn't home, the street light was out, so no one would see me. The people who were home were inside. My car was parked across the street, and we're a small shop who don't wear uniforms, so if anyone did spot me, they'd have no way to connect me to my employer. Animals pee outside all the time. Humans are animals. This is fine. I scurried over to the tallest bush in her front yard. She didn't really have much of a yard, more just a walkway lined with bushes and flowers that ran adjacent to her front door. The biggest cluster of bushes, the only one where I could be sure there would be no visible splatter on the side of the house, was about 4 feet from her door. I looked both ways, unzipped and let fly after the initial millisecond of relief. I noticed the sound was way off, more like pissing on something solid than something leafy. I started panicking, thinking I'd aimed wrong. But once I start, I can't stop midstream, so I kept squinting into the darkness to see if maybe I was hitting a key rock or something and could just move a few inches over. Instead, all of a sudden, I heard a way more concerning noise. A deep voice exclaiming, "What the fuck?" And before I could turn around, assuming I'd been caught by a neighbour, a man came leaping out of the bushes. He blew past me, brushing my golden shower off him as he did. He spit pretty emphatically on the ground, so I thought I might have beamed him right in the face. I didn't see where he went after a few paces, but though this next part is kind of a blur, I don't think I remember hearing a car screech out from a bit further away after a minute. I'd gotten some night vision by that point, so I was able to make out his height, build and outfit, but only the most general details of each. I was in such a shock that I didn't even put my dick away. I just stood there trying to figure out what had happened. The reality was so terrifying that my mind refused to accept it, and impulsively searched for a reasonable explanation that could make everything okay. I thought, could these bushes lead to some backyard area and just looked like they were against the house? Could they have been obscuring an open window? My inner voice was desperately screaming, bruh, that man was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree weather. That was a bad man. You're in a bad situation. But the very idea that I was within inches of a guy who would be hiding in bushes at all, let alone in front of a young woman's house at night, just wasn't something I was ready to grapple with yet. I was coping by not coping. My fight or flight response totally failed me at that point, because my dumbass did the absolute last thing I should have done and approached the bushes to try and validate this. There must have been a good reason for a man in a hoodie to be behind these bushes in the middle of the night. Theory. So I walked over to the side, turned on my phone's flashlight and tried to peer around the line of shrubbery. Pro tip: as scary as things may look in the dark, seeing them with a single beam of your flashlight can sometimes make it even worse. That's when I saw the bag. There was a tattered drawstring bag sitting behind the bushes, slightly splashed with pee, but I was in such a moronic daze from shock that I groped around for it, thinking, see, this is it. This will explain why he was back here. It explained it once I maneuvered it over and pulled it open. I saw a sharp knife, a roll of tape, and a bottle of pills. The delusions officially broke at that point, and all the adrenaline, endorphins, and self-preservation instincts that had been suppressed kicked in 10 times over. I became whatever the opposite of dazed is, more laser focused than I've ever been in my life, with one singular goal: get back to my car. I dropped the bag, booked it across the street, got in my car and slammed the pedal to the floor. Before the door was even all the way closed, I went as far as I could, as fast as I could, until I hit a red signal. Then I pulled off to the side and realised I shouldn't be driving any more than necessary in the condition I was in. I pulled into the parking lot a 24-hour drugstore and took a deep breath. I was finally calm and coherent, enough to zip up and formulate a plan of action. My first lucid thought was, who do I call first? The police or the girl whose house that was? I thought about it for what couldn't have really been more than 10 seconds, but felt like an hour, and decided, okay, I am in my locked car with the engine running. If trouble starts, I can drive away. I know something's up. She might not. She needs to know not to keep walking in that direction. But as I was dialing her number, it occurred to me, what if there was no girl? I thought. I remembered delivering to that house before, but what if I was wrong? What if the girl on the phone was just a decoy to get me over there to rob me, or worse? Every pizza guy on the planet has seen the Evil Genius documentary by now, so I thought. She called me all out of breath. She wasn't home. The whole thing was off. Can't risk it. I'll start with the cops. I called 911. Operator was very helpful in keeping me calm, because I was a complete wreck by this point. He kept assuring me that someone would be there soon. I kept telling them they had to get there before the girl did, but I was trying to express 3 thoughts at once, and really damaging my own credibility. It came out more as, you've got to save this girl, because he wasn't after me. I was just delivering a pizza. Unless they were after me, in which case there might not be a girl. But I talked to the one on the phone, so then you should find that girl, because they used her to lure me there. But if she's real, she doesn't know about the guy who was also real, and there could be more guys if there's actually a girl. And you know what? Even if there isn't a girl, there might actually be more guys. I only checked one part of the bushes, so I don't actually know. But we'll know which guy is the one I saw, because I pissed all over him. You know, I didn't mean to. This was back when I thought the girl was real, but not home. But she might be real, so you really need to find her if she is, because the guy was real. Finally, they basically just asked me to stop talking and stay on the line, but that was when I saw an incoming call from the customer. I couldn't answer it without disrupting my 911 call, so I just ignored it. But then she sent me this text like, "Hey, I'm here. Don't see you." I told 911 she was there, and they said officers were only minutes away, but who knows how long that meant, especially after I'd given such a scattered account of the events in my panic. I just felt overwhelmed with guilt, because my rational mind said the odds of her being a decoy girl or some large scam targeting pizza guys were low, and the odds of her being the intended victim of a predator were high. So I put the 911 call on mute, where I can hear them but they can't hear me, and turned back, heart absolutely pounding out of my chest, compulsively muttering fuck, 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 fuck the entire way. Then I took 911 off mute and told them I had returned to look for the girl. They weren't happy about that, but I saw her meandering past the parked cars in the street, looking to see if one was mine. I waved her down, flashing my brights. She bounced over to the window of my car, happy-go-lucky. I figured that was a good sign that she wasn't in on whatever this was, but I just got so scared to be back in the general area and to not know what had happened, or what was going on, or what was going to happen. I kept whispering, get in, and she was like, get it, huh? Oh, you want me to get the pizza from the back? I don't want to make the same mistake as her that I had made with 911, so instead of trying to tell her the whole story, I stuck to the bare basic facts that there was a man in your bushes. I'm on the phone with the police. I don't know where he is right now. Please get in the car so we can lock the doors. I was barely able to get even those sentences out, and I was shaking like I'd had 10 cups of black coffee. I held up my phone with 911 on the call screen to verify it for her. I thought that was why she got in the car without no further explanation. But it turns out that wasn't entirely it. You still there? Is she with you? Are you safe? Are you safe? Is anyone else there? 911 kept checking in, not knowing who the third party I was talking to was. I reassured them and we drove more cautiously this time to a location 911 instructed us to wait at to speak with the police after they cleared the area. I don't actually have to do much after that. The police came pretty soon after. A police car met us. I gave a statement telling them everything I observed, and she went to go to speak to more officers in more detail than they needed me for. It turns out the reason she got right into a strange pizza guy's car without probing any deeper into my story is because she knew who the man was right away from my description. Because she knew who the man was right away from my description. She had an abusive ex-boyfriend who was apparently psychotic enough that he immediately came to mind from hearing, "There's a guy in your bushes." She later called us to thank me and insist on leaving a huge tip. I wasn't there when the call came in, so the kid who answered didn't know to refuse or accept the money, but the manager already promised the next time we see her, we can load her up with enough 1 free pie cards to last a lifetime. Easily the scariest thing that has ever happened to me, on the job or off. I don't get the chance to tell the story much because I try to avoid sharing it with anyone who could possibly know the girl or know of the event. But I'm still not the same since, even though I know he didn't even have anything to do with me directly. This truly shook me to my core. So, man in the bushes, let's not meet. If you would like more scary stories and creepy weirdos like this, don't forget to push that subscribe button and leave a like. Good night, hellhounds. Tonight we have some really spooky paranormal stories. The time I felt like something was stealing my soul. Posted by Prizog. Hey everyone, I'm kinda new here. Created this account back in last November, but I haven't really been using it until today. Long story short, I was watching YouTube videos about paranormal encounters, and some of the stories came from Reddit. So I was like, why not share mine there too? Since the community seems so passionate, I'm really excited to share this story and maybe get some answers as to what happened. Anyway, let's get into it. This happened back in summer of 2012. I think I was 16 at the time, while playing a game of football with friends. I dislocated my right knee and then had to wear a splint for a few weeks following my injury. I had a bunk bed at the time, so in order to get in bed I had to climb a ladder, which I couldn't do anymore due to not being able to bend my leg. So every night I would put my mattress on the floor and sleep there. One Friday night, as my family was sleeping, I had the most frightening experience of my life. I am a Seventh-day Adventist, which basically means that I go to church on Saturdays and not Sundays, and I noticed that on several occasions I would experience sleep paralysis on Friday nights, making me scared to go to sleep and end up tired the following day, which is what happened that fateful night. As I was laying on my back, just vibing, I guess, I suddenly couldn't move a muscle. At that point I wasn't scared at all, since this happened to me several times. I did what I always do, try moving my toes, my fingers, control my breathing, and finally retake control over my body. Only this time I felt a physical presence. I felt something pressuring my chest, as if someone was pinning me down with their knee. As I started panicking, My mouth opened ever so slightly against my will, and I felt as if something or someone was sucking something out of me. It lasted only an instant, but a quick breath came out of me. It was a bit like the Dementors in Harry Potter. Right after that, I was able to move again, got up, went to the bathroom and put cold water on my face. I then stayed there, afraid of going back to my room, but eventually I was able to sleep, and outside of minor sleep paralysis, nothing of that caliber has ever happened to me again. I would love to know what you guys think of it. If any of you has experienced something similar. To this day, I'm still trying to make sense of it. It's happening again. Submitted by Mr. Mosby 667. Context: I've had many experiences with ghosts and spirits since I was little, to the point where it became easy for me to communicate with them, almost like a voice in my head. It doesn't belong to me. This also helps with my witch work, seeing as I mainly use tarot cards, a pendulum, and other divination techniques. Story: I am a witch in North VA, and because of that I often communicate with spirits and go to them for advice when I need it. About a month ago, I went to a graveyard with a friend near my neighbourhood, and while he sat under a tree, I went to look around the yard and occasionally place coins on graves I was drawn to. As I came to a certain area, I was invited to revive some advice from a spirit. I can't remember her name, and I went along with other spirits saying similar things to the first. But when I was stopped at a grave for a man named Robert, he said he'll be with you to protect you from harm, or something along those lines. Shortly after, I went on a vacation to visit my grandparents for 2 weeks. But after I came back, odd things have been happening. I keep seeing figures from the corner of my eye, hearing plastic bags move, or other objects moving. It only happens when I'm alone in a room. I know it sounds suspicious, but I've lived in haunted places. I know what it's like. As I'm writing this, I keep hearing thuds from upstairs. I'm in the basement. It's 3 a.m. Not long before that, I heard tapping on the window. I think sometime soon I'm going to sage the house again. Sometime very soon. The experience that changed me. Posted by Save King. I've heard many stories from YouTube channels about people's encounter with the unknown. Today, I felt that I should share my encounter on Reddit. I have had many encounters with the paranormal since I was a kid, from seeing doors closing when I was alone in the room, to hearing people walk upstairs when I'm in the basement home alone. But this particular story has made me more aware of the unknown. Before I talk about all my experiences, I have to tell you about myself. I'm a boy, my mother is American, and my father is Pakistan. I have a sister who's older than me, and that's pretty much my family. Now I want to say in advance that this post is going to be really long. So feel free to grab a cup of coffee and a blanket to cover with while you read my experience. Ever since my mother was a little girl, she had the ability to see things that no one else could see. My mother was born in Guyana, and Guyana itself has many urban legends that scare the locals. My mother would see people sitting on trees, or even sometimes they have communicated with her. She was never afraid of these things. When she was 9, she moved to New York, Queens, in her grandparents' house. She would always see a lady in white in the house. According to my mother, there was 2 spirits in the house. One was good and one was bad. The lady in white was good, but the bad one was like a little Oompa Loompa from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The lady in white would always show herself to my mother, whereas the bad spirit would only make his presence known, but would rarely show itself. The spirit once tried to choke my mother when she was sleeping in the basement alone. It even would sometimes trick her by taking the appearance of her siblings. My mother said that the bad spirit wanted them to leave the house, but the lady in white would protect them. Besides my mother, my grandmother has seen the lady in white. My mother was once sleeping with her brother in the basement when she had a dream that the lady in white was telling her to go to the back of the basement. Now, in the dream, my mother said that her brother was also there, and he could see the lady in white. My mother and her brother followed the lady to the back of the basement, where the lady in white told them to move the carpet from the floor. When they moved the carpet from the floor, they found a door there that was very small, so small that only someone really skinny could fit inside. The lady in white proceeded to tell them to open the door, and when they opened the door, they both awoke from the dream at the same time. My mother then said that they saw the white lady in front of them in the mirror. It was the first time my mother saw the white lady's face. My mother had never seen the white lady's face. She always saw the lady wearing white and could never see her face. My mother said the white lady was very gorgeous and had reddish hair. The lady in white then thanked my mother and her brother for opening the door. Since that day, my mother has never seen the white lady again until she was pregnant with my sister. Now, fast forward to when I was born. My mother had moved to Pakistan with my father in 2007. my uncle was getting married. We went to America to attend the wedding. I was 6 at the time. We were staying in my aunt's house. Now everyone in the family knew that my aunt's house was haunted because my mother has seen things in my aunt's house. But the only person who didn't know about it was me. Now, me and my sister would sleep in the basement while all the adults would sleep upstairs. Because my sister, who is older, wanted to watch movies with my other cousins. I remember one morning I was brushing my teeth in the basement bathroom when I saw the bathroom door open and a hand stretched inside and grabbed the door handle and began to close the door. I immediately dropped my toothbrush and ran outside the bathroom to my sister, who was in the basement with my cousins. After the wedding, we came back to Pakistan, and I would start to see a shadow figure in my house, especially in the living room. I would always tell my mother, but she would always tell me it's nothing, because she didn't want me to get scared. A few years passed by and we moved from that house. My father rented the house to a family of 5. The family had a daughter who was about 6. According to the family, their daughter would always complain about a man who would come out from under her bed at night. Now that we are living in this brand new house, which was made by my father, in the new house, I would always feel uneasy when I'm alone or when I'm in the dining room. By the time I was 14, so it couldn't have been my imagination. In 2013, my grandmother from my father's side passed away, and the following year my grandfather passed away. The house in which my grandparents were living in became empty and no one was living there. Now, I know this may sound like a lie or a joke to some people, but my grandparents' house was haunted by a jinn. In Muslim religion, jinn is the most scary paranormal creature. In 2016, I decided to move in to my grandparents' house and make some renovations. My father would travel to America frequently, so it would mostly be my mother and me and my sister in the house. My mother and sister would sleep in one room, and I would sleep in my grandparents' room. The first few nights was peaceful, but 1 week after we moved in the house, I began to see the shadow figure in the house. She would frequently tell us to pray, since we are somewhat of religious. Me and my sister would always make fun of my mother, but one night, when I was sleeping in my grandparents' room, I heard my father calling me to open my room door and let him in. I quickly got up to open the door, but then it hit me. I was in America, so how could he be calling me and telling me to open the door? At that moment the door began to move like someone was trying to open it. Then I started to hear banging on the door. Now, I want you guys to know that the room my mother and sister was sleeping in was parallel to my room I was sleeping in. So if I was to open, I would be facing the room my mother and sister were in. Coming back to banging, I quickly ran and hid under my bed sheets. The next thing I remember was waking up in the morning with my room door open wide. I got up and ran to my mother, asking if she heard any noise from my room last night, and to my surprise, she didn't hear anything, same as my sister. After this incident, I began to pray frequently and began to visit the mosque near my house. We stayed for about 4 months in that house and had many little occurrences, but the night before we left the house, I was sleeping in my room watching anime when I began to feel like someone is watching me. I shrugged the feeling off and said to myself, it's time to go to sleep. I closed my eyes and fell asleep, but after a while I woke up. I wasn't able to move my body. I started to panic when I felt the pressure of someone holding me down. Now, I want to let you guys know that my eyes were closed and I never opened them, so I could not see what was holding me down. After a while like this, the pressure on me started to fade away, but I still couldn't move. I began to say the Quran in my mind when I heard movement in the room around my bed. Then I got this feeling, sorrow, and felt like I should just die. But then it happened. Whatever was in the room came next to my ears and started to talk to me. I couldn't understand much, but then it said loud and clear that I will get you the same way I got your grandparents and their parents. At the same time, the morning prayer, Fajr Azim, started. I felt relieved and could move my body. As soon as I could move my body, I ran out of the room, outside the house, and refused to come inside until we shift the same day. I have had many more experiences, but this one was the worst of all. I would like to thank all of you who listened to my story.